Hello, my fellow Tanglers. My name is Martha, and I would like to welcome you to the Zentangle Project Pack series. This lesson is part of Project Pack number 4. Project Pack number 4 is designed around a specific project we are calling the Zentangle Spinner. We are using our annual 12 Days of Zentangle series to share 12 consecutive days of lessons with you to guide you along in filling the spinner with tangles. Today is the first day in the series, but if you are watching these days after they are posted, you can easily do any of these lessons out of order. Today we're going to guide you through filling one wedge of this beautiful spinner with some tangles. So here I have my spinner, which I was very lucky to have my niece Mazzy help me fill in with a touch of watercolor just to add some beautiful backgrounds to my tangles. I'm going to pick a section of my wedge here and guide you through some tangles to fill. I'm going to choose this section right here to work in today, but you're welcome to choose any wedge that you would like. I'm going to start at the center of my wheel and work out, kind of working small to large as far as spaces go. So I'm going to put a familiar tangle to me, anyway, a tangle called jetties here in this space. And I like to start with something that's familiar when I tackle a project like this, just to get my hand warmed up and my tangling sharp. And jetties is a simple series of orb shapes that we nestle in next to one another, and you can watch along if you like. I'm going to start towards the center and draw a nice orb shape. And then I'm going to continue drawing these, and they can vary in size, but not too small, because we're going to go back and add a little detail after we finish filling this space. And I'm nestling these orbs right up close to one another. And just like working on a tile, I'm kind of turning my spinner as I work. As I run into areas that I just can't put another orb in, you'll see I'm just sort of filling it in with a little ink, creating a nice little background there. We often use the word orb in Zentangle rather than the word circle because, well, I don't know anybody that can really draw a perfect circle, so we keep our expectations light and enjoy the hand-drawn effect of a beautiful orb. Inking in this background also just adds a little bit of dimension when you're working with a tangle that has so much open space. And even though I'm just drawing these simple round shapes, I'm taking my time, trying to make the best stroke each time. After I've got my orbs filled in, I'm going to go back and add a stripe into each one of these shapes. And it's not a very wide stripe, just like that. But then I'm going to aura each side. And turning my spinner, I'll fill in another one at a slightly different angle. Turn in again. If your orb shapes are too small, you could just put the stripe in there and you don't have to put the aura. Some of them might be a little tight. It's fun to see how just a small little detail totally changes the overall effect. Isn't that fun? All right, so for my next section, I'm kind of excited to work on this gorgeous blue right here. I'm going to do a tangle called Flux, and there are so many variations that I've seen of this tangle, and I think that's kind of awesome. My way of doing it always ends up to me to look sort of like something growing on a vine, leaf shapes growing on a vine. But I'll show you how I'm going to do it today and see what you think. So the basic shape that I'm going to work with it's like a teardrop shape, and you can watch me for a minute. Sort of a little teardrop. And I'm going to work connecting these teardrops up an imaginary vine. I'm going to sort of alternate which direction I'm going in, and also the size. I sort of like that variation in size. This tangle really fills a space quickly. And each time you come down that line, it starts to define it even more. Maybe turning your spinner and starting from another direction. Feel free to work on a tile first as you follow along with these lessons. I can imagine that it's hard to make that first mark on your beautiful new spinner, so by all means, do these as exercises first, and then you can go back and fill them in with your tangles. So flux, that's sort of basic flux right there. And I'm always trying to think of ways to change it up a little bit. And recently I've been playing around with this as a sort of enhancement. I'm just going to go in and draw this little triangle at the top of each one of my petals. And especially with this inking in process, if you happen to be working on some of your spinner that has been painted, you'll notice that you don't need a whole lot of pressure to get that ink to come out. The paper is a bit softer now. So work on that touch, that light touch. Also with a tangle like this, it's nice to put a little extra ink down since there is so much open space, a lot like our last tangle we did together. I'm just going to fill in some of these little, where the petals meet here, just add a little, I don't know, it's like a dewdrop or something. Just again, little layers. Sort of fun to add these little garnishes at the end. maybe I'll add one more little. There we go. All right, the next section on my spinner is certainly inviting a border tangle if I ever saw it. So I thought I'd pull from a while ago. We were talking about different borders, and this tangle came up, and I thought this would be perfect here. And it's called Zander, Z-A-N-D-E-R. And it's a simple tangle, but it has a nice effect once we shade it. So I'm going to just use these two bands that are already here, and I'm going to create bands going down it. And you'll see I'm sort of wrapping those around as if this is three-dimensional. So my bands are pretty similarly spaced apart. Like that. Now I'm going to turn the spinner so that I'm working vertically, and I'm going to create a series of aura lines. And so that I can stay on track, I'm going to actually draw my center line first and then aura to each side of that. So I'll start here, and when I'm drawing this line, I'm going to actually skip some spaces. Can you see that? Leaving a little bit of a blank space, which will highlight in the end. And then I'm going to work to the right and try to really do some fine spaced auras here. Very light touch on my pen. Then I'll turn my spinner and do the other side. Again, a very light touch helps you get those lines even closer together. Isn't that cool? Great border. So for my last two sections here, I'm actually going to, well, it's not really cheating, but I'm going to put them together and use the whole space for my last tangle. And I'm going to do a tangle called Well. And Well is a grid tangle, and I just have these perfect lines just waiting for me to draw my grid. So I'm going to use these lines that are already here, and I'm going to actually, with my pen, just sort of redefine that grid line here, grid line here, and then down the center. And then I'm going to draw a line down the center of each space that's left. So don't get confused by your bands there. And again, we're not using rulers. This is just with your eye. And then I'm simply going to draw a line through the center this way. Now, You'll see that this is slightly curved, and so just a gentle curve will work. A trick for me is I put a dot where it looks like to be the center for me, here and here. So I sort of have an idea where I want to land. So with my nice little grid set up, the next step is to put a circle in each grid right in the center. And I'm going to work with a circle about that big. And put one in the center of each square of my grid. Now the basic stroke of well is the letter C, depending on which way you draw it. But the way I've learned to do it is I'm going to do a backwards C because I like the idea that this circle and my letter C form the number 9. As long as I keep that in my head, I always know which way to make my shape go. So I start with that, and then I'm going to turn my tile, and I'm going to draw the number 9 again. Gently curved shape. Turn my spinner. Draw the 9. So that's the basic shape, and you can perhaps find it easy to do all one direction and then turn and do all the next direction. But I thought it'd be helpful for you to see what we're going for here. So why don't we do that together? You'll see how I'm taking off on the top of that circle and drawing the number 9. Taking off, drawing the 9. I'll turn my tile and we'll do it again. And when we put that last stroke in, you see this beautiful meta pattern appear. Isn't that so cool? Maybe you can go back and fill in those center circles that we first drew. I'm leaving a little sparkle there in the middle just for some highlight. All right, now we're going to go back and shade all of these tangles. I'm going to put my pen away and pick up my graphite pencil. And with these jetties, you know, it's kind of a background textural tangle, so I think what I'll do is sort of choose a few of the larger ones towards the middle and completely ignore those. But then just with my graphite, kind of go around those, let those ones sort of rise to the top, whereas we'll let the other ones fade into the background with the graphite. With my tortillon, I'm going to just kind of go in there and smooth it out. You don't need a heavy hand on this. Just gently working it into that lovely paper. Sort of let those ones in the middle really pop to the top. It's kind of fun. With flux, you know, we have this sort of lovely blue background, and we've done a little, you know, detail here. So I think what I'm going to do is just emphasize this this sort of vine that developed underneath just from connecting my little petals. And of course, if you have a favorite way of shading or doing a particular tangle, by all means, this is your art and your experience, so I hope you do what makes you happy. And then for my Xander border, I think I'm just going to work with emphasizing these, you know, beautiful lines here, and I'm going to pretty heavy-handedly go on the edges, but being very careful not to put any graphite in the center. Those little tiny highlights that we added really show up when you shade those edges. And finally with well, I'm sure there's a lot of things you can do. I like just adding a little bit of graphite on the inside of each one of these, you know, curved shapes. So on the inside, I'll show you what it looks like here. And take your time. I think the overall effect won't really become apparent till you're just about finished. I love how the tortillon softens that graphite. It's really the best. And I'm using the edge of my graphite pencil and it really lays down a nice layer rather than a sharp point. It makes it very easy to smooth. There we go. That looks pretty cool. You know, with all that shading, you have just a little bit of graphite on your tortillon. Sometimes you can just soften those edges a little bit. And there we have it. There's day one in the books. Thanks for joining me. See you soon.